Yeah, if you want to, can you hear me okay?
Testing, testing. Just try that. Testing.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Yeah, hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can anyone hear me? One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I can hear you, but it seems like you cannot hear me in the video. I can see a woman with glasses, but I can hear everything, but it seems like she cannot hear me.
So we can't get him. We can't get him. We're not getting any audio from you at all.
Right? Yeah, because I'm hearing everything. It seems like there's no speakers hooked up to your computer.
Can you hear me now?
1 second, hang on. I can hear you now, but I
Hello?
don't think you can hear me.
Excuse me, testing, testing.
Can you hear me now?
You got it?
So I cannot hear anything from the video feed. I can only hear you on your phone.
So you, Testing for Ulrich Benzer.
10.
Nothing, right?
This is a test. Can you hear me?
Ulrich, nothing?
Yeah, I cannot hear you at all. And I don't. I mean, I can hear you on the computer, but I don't
Hold
think you
on.
can.
You still can't hear me though, right?
I can hear you on the phone, and I can hear a lot of background noise on the computer. But the problem is, you cannot hear me. It seems like.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me on the computer. Oh, okay. I'm just going to mute my phone. Make sure you can hear me on the computer as well. So can you hear me when I say this, Mark?
Yes, we got it.
Okay, so you can hear me. So, but I just hear background noise. I don't hear any questions. I can't hear you speak.
I'm going to do a test right now. I'll do a test right now. Hold on.
Okay.
Ulrich Benzer. Ulrich Benzer. You got it?
It seems to be working, yeah. Okay, we'll try. And Mark, if it doesn't work, you just call me on my cell phone, like on this number, and then we'll figure it out. Yeah. Hi. Good. Seems to be working.
He's what? Are, well, you know, if we can't get his information, you're gonna have to like relay it for him. You know, I just, you know, let everybody know that he's here too. This one. Right. This is coming, no, this is coming from the West Coast. Yeah, West Coast. All right. Ready? Yeah, she's, yeah.
You got it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good evening. This is the Dania Beach City Commission workshop on vacation rentals. It is Monday, June 10, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. Can you please call the roll?
Mayor Llewellyn,
Here.
Vice Mayor Odman,
Here.
Commissioner Harris,
Here.
Commissioner James,
Here.
City Manager Garcia,
Here.
City Attorney Ansbro.
Here.
Thank you.
Everybody, I had occasion to receive a call this morning from Commissioner Brandon Marty, who's got a family matter to attend to. She may be able to make it here and may show up in the middle of the meeting. She will certainly be here for tomorrow's commission meeting, but apologizes for the matter that had to be addressed.
Okay. All right. So the first item for discussion is the vacation rentals. City Manager, did you have comments you wanted to raise?
Yes,
first?
Mayor, thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me? We're very excited to bring you this public workshop to discuss vacation rentals. This is something that I know the commissioners feel the same way. Anything that disrupts the quality of life of our residents is something that's very, very important to us. So we are working on continuing to develop the plan to address these short-term rentals, working as a team. Our code team, working with Broward Sheriff's Office, working with an outside vendor to identify and to be able to track. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Community Development to begin the presentation today for you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager Mark LaFerrier, Community Development. And as the manager said, we're happy to be here tonight and hopefully answer some questions by providing information about vacation rentals. I think everyone knows that this is not a Dania Beach phenomenon. This is a worldwide phenomenon that's growing every day and sort of morphs and changes as regulations change. And to try and keep up with the business like this is very difficult to do. I think you'll see when we're done with our presentation that we've been very diligent since this has sort of come on our radar screen about a year ago. In 2011, the City Commission passed an ordinance just before there was a preemption by state law to pass any ordinances involving vacation rentals. And before that time, vacation rentals sort of already had a head start in the economy of Dania Beach and other places throughout the world. But since that time, in 2011, we didn't hear of any complaints, and we also got no applications for vacation rentals until last year. Since last year, we've sort of picked up our enforcement. I think we've sophisticated our enforcement and our intelligence on this matter so that we're trying to be as responsive as possible. What you'll hear tonight is some statistics about our enforcement. You'll also hear from our guest here tonight, Ulrich Benzer, who is the foremost authority on the regulation of vacation rentals throughout the United States. You'll hear a little bit from our police chief during Q&A. Our city attorney is going to give some information on the state law and on our local ordinance. And Eric Walden, our chief of code compliance, will be speaking on some of the statistics. Now, I'm going to ask for some indulgence here right up front because I had Mr. Benzer right up front with some of his information. And we're going to see if we're able to do this under our current technology. Ulrich, are you there?
I'm here, but unfortunately I cannot see the slides. So it's hard for me to sort of speak exactly to the right slides in the right order unless you maybe can give me a clue as to what you're showing on the screen.
I'll give you a clue. Sounds like 2 syllables. No. It's your slide that says business and operations of vacation rentals.
Okay, perfect. Great. So first of all, thanks for inviting me today. I'm happy to be here. Just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Ulrich Benzer. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Host Compliance. Host Compliance recently purchased another company called SDR Helper that has been contracted with the city of Dania Beach for about a year or so to help on the enforcement of the city's short-term rental ordinance. And I'm here to provide just a little bit of background, both on what's happening sort of more holistically, but also specifically in Dania Beach. Just to sort of like lay out the lay of the land. So to sort of get there, I think the first thing that's important to understand is what is a short-term rental and the way we define it here. And the way that most cities currently define short-term rentals is the rental of residential dwelling units for periods of less than 1 month. And I think that's also consistent with the way it's defined in Dania Beach. And I think one of the things that's really changed in the last decade or so has been that this market has not only exploded, I'll show you that on another slide, but it's really also changed and morphed as Mark mentions. So the whole market is essentially now moved online. And there are a number of large tech companies, some of them that you may know of, such as Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, and Flipkey, that are essentially functioning as online marketplaces for these types of rentals. And what those websites do is that they connect travelers with local hosts, people who want to rent out their residential dwelling units, and make it easy for those people to make bookings, just like if you're booking a hotel, make payments. You can use credit cards and debit cards and all of the sort of modern conveniences that you expect. And people also can leave reviews and provide feedback on their experiences. So this, as you can imagine, is a sort of like new technology, and it's growing like crazy. So Mark, I don't know if you can maybe go to the next page and I can show the growth in short-term rentals.
I've got it. Go ahead.
Perfect. So the short-term rental market has grown about 15 times, so 1,500% since 2011 on a global scale. And right now there is about 15,000 online listings for these types of rentals out there. The biggest websites are Airbnb, that you may have heard of, but there's also a number of other players. Another really big one is Booking.com, which is a company that owns a number of accommodation websites, including Priceline.com in the US. And there's actually a myriad of other websites. So we are tracking about 125 different websites that facilitates short-term rentals in one way or another. And next slide, Mark, and if you can give me a clue again.
It's your slide on the explosive growth, and it has different cities.
I don't know about that. Maybe you guys go to the next one. It's about the Danish city one. Can you show me that one, the one with the
Yeah.
469?
Actually, Ulrich, I got those a little later on. The next slide is actually an opportunity for our city attorney to introduce
Okay,
discussion
perfect.
on the preemptive nature of our state law and the
Perfect.
city's ordinance itself. Cities in Florida in a little bit of a unique position as opposed to other states in the United States. I mean, we have a lot of tourists and tourism in the state of Florida, so there was great interest by the vacation rental industry to get a foothold into Florida. And in doing so, in 2011, they passed a law that gave the cities a very small window to have an ordinance approved. And that's where I wanted Tom to kind of talk about that a little bit more.
Okay, thanks, Mark. In our circumstances, we were very fortunate with Susan Trevarthen's help here from Weiss Road, my old law firm. She had worked on a number of cities, and we were just at the cusp of getting this law on the books right before we were preempted, or that's a fancy word for lawyers to say we would have been prohibited by state law adopted June 1, 2011, from doing anything with these types of operations. We have a very good law on the books. I keep saying that because I really believe it. It's very detailed. It's from 8 years ago, and it still serves us well. And now, of course, we're using it in a lot more circumstances as these things grow, as our consultant is pointing out to us. But to begin with, a vacation rental is defined, so we all know what it means. It's a group of units. It could be a condominium, timeshare, or any individually or collectively owned single-family, two-family, or multiple-family house under four units, which is also considered transient public lodging establishment by the state. But for our purposes, our law only applies to units that have 4 or less units. So fourplexes, triplexes, duplexes, single-family homes. And also, our law only applies to stays, which is a good thing, of at least a minimum of 5 days. You have to imagine that other cities, such as Fort Lauderdale, did not make it on time, did not have this law in the books. And it wasn't until 2014 when the cities clamored for some help for the ones that didn't make it on time to do something for them. So the state law was amended to allow the cities that missed the clock to come back in and to allow them to address noise, parking, trash, and related issues on a very limited basis. One thing that still remains for all of us is that we cannot prohibit these at all. That's clear in the state law, nor can we regulate the duration other than what we already have now, which is 5 days, which is, that again prevents you from having these 1 or 2 night stays, which plagues a lot of cities. You have transient rentals over and over, or with the weekend parties. Those are prohibited in our city, fortunately. So ours is 5 days. So again, we have the benefit of very good law, and now we're dealing with it. The other cities got that relaxation, but we cannot go back, and I don't recommend we'd ever go back and try to amend as to the duration or the frequency. We can't even regulate the frequency, meaning how many of these can they have a year? How many times can they rent a unit a year? 30, 50, we can't tell you how many, or to confine it to 3 or so. It just cannot be done under the state law. What has happened in a number of cities, this has been going on since 2011, of course, but beginning in 2016, the industry decided we need to push back against the cities and the counties who are trying to regulate us. So they've been doing that very actively. Every year, the Florida legislature is confronted with lobbyists and, of course, legislators that recommend this should be taken away from the cities. They don't know how to do this properly. We'll do it on a statewide basis, and just trust us. Well, we don't necessarily want to trust them to this. We have fought it bitterly, as many cities have done through the Broward League of Cities and the Florida League of Cities every year, and have managed once again, even in 2019, to push the wolf away from the door. This wolf will come back. It's not going to go away. These people who run these operations want to have the cities not regulate them, because there are, of course, different laws in different cities, and they want to have the state regulate it. So we're going to have to deal with that. But again, our ordinance, I'm very proud of it, very pleased with it. Mark's going to be able to give us a recommendation or a statement of actually how we're doing with it. And I've heard about it, and I think we're doing a really good job with it.
Sure. Tom's description of the ordinance is pretty good. It's pretty thorough and pretty detailed. And enforcing it does take a fair amount of effort. He mentioned that we're only regulating single-family to fourplexes. One of the things that is illegal to do is even to advertise a vacation rental, and that's where Ulrich's company comes in so successfully as a teammate with the city, and Eric will talk about that a little bit later, and so will Ulrich. So you can't advertise or operate a vacation rental without a city certificate that approves them for that use. One thing that's a little bit unique to Dania Beach, and one thing that we take very seriously, is that we require a full inspection from all building trades before you can get approval of the certificate. What that means is we'll send our team of inspectors out with code enforcement, and they look at the house to make sure that there isn't work that's been done without a permit, work's been done to code, to make sure there's certain safety features, such as GFI outlets in the right locations, smoke alarms work properly, that there's not over occupancy, that there's fire extinguishers, and that there's other sort of public safety and health and safety matters that are taken care of with the building. During the process, that is something that slows down some of the applicants and candidates for a vacation rental, is complying with all those building codes. That approval, that certificate only lasts for 1 year. When that year is up, they have to come back in and make application again, and they go through the process all over again. We also require compliance with all state regulations, which is pretty minimal in this case. They just have to register to pay their taxes, and they get certain state licenses. There's not really a regulatory arm of the state government that looks out after vacation rentals. They sort of leave that up to the cities to do. And then there's a provision for the maximum number of persons that can stay in any unit, and it's maxed out at 2 persons per bedroom plus 2. So a 3-bedroom is 6 people plus 2 more is 8. But in no cases can it go beyond 10. They also must have a registered agent, so that there's someone that can be contacted if there's a problem with the tenants there or an issue with the property itself. And also that the tenants, when they come in, they're provided a book with all the city's key information, code of ordinances, and contact information, such as when they can when the trash has to be put out, what types of trash, and how much you can park, and things like that. And if there is a unit or a host that doesn't comply with the regulations, then what they can suffer a suspension or revocation of that certificate. Now, I just briefly kind of describe what the process is, but this is the process in a flow chart. There's fees along the way. There's different inspections along the way.
Mark, can you hold on for 1 second?
Sure.
I know, Commissioner James, you have your light lit. I'd like him to get through the presentation, and then we can maybe ask questions at the end.
But it's on the slide that's like right there.
I understand that, but I mean, we have an agenda here that basically says that we're going through the presentation, and then we'll ask questions at the end. Thank you.
This slide just simply sort of shows the process for getting a vacation rental certificate that I described in the previous slide. But one of the things that we do know is that vacation rentals are a little bit of a different use than your neighbor, although your neighbor may do some of the things that happens in a vacation rental. But there are certain concerns and complaints that do happen along the way. The first one that we hear about is an illegal use. There's a vacation rental next door. I think there's a vacation rental next door. There's new people coming in on a weekly basis. We'll get calls like that. We can take calls from, we can take calls, complaints, either anonymously or through email or through phone calls. All could be anonymous. Obviously, the emails cannot be. But we'll follow up with that by checking the complaint to see if they are advertising as a vacation rental. And then we can also confirm if they're operating as a vacation rental. That results in a notice of violation. Other things like traffic noise and other disruptive activities, those are things that we are in the process of improving on, such as our noise ordinance and procedures. But those are typically things that are going to happen after hours. That might be a call to BSO. BSO is here tonight to help out with any questions on that. And there might be other things that happen at a vacation rental location, not unlike any other places in cities that BSO might have additional investigative matters. So those sort of other disruptive activities. They're handled already by other ordinances. We might look at a way of strengthening those ordinances, but there are ordinances that deal with those. The other one is excessive parking of vehicles, and if they're parking in the public right-of-way, they can be ticketed and towed. If they're on private property, we have to issue a notice of violation to go before the magistrate. Usually by the time the magistrate's hearing rolls around, the car's already been has been relocated, but the most effective is if it's in the street, it could be ticketed or towed. And then excessive garbage. There's a code violation if they put the garbage out on the wrong days, and if they put out too much. If they put out too much on the wrong day, then it's considered bulk, and the city can pick up and then fine the property owner. And then there's the information on all the data that this has all been generated over the last a little bit more than a year. I mentioned that we really didn't get our first complaints and our first application until about a year ago. Eric, if you want to come up and sort of go over some of the statistics, this will sort of describe the work that we've done to date and where we're at as far as enforcement on what's existing today.
Good evening, Commission Manager, Eric Walton, Co-Compliance Manager and Parking Manager. And also, just for everyone's information, this information will be available on the city's website with a link under the Co-Compliance. And if there's any other questions, feel free to call my office and we'll get more information. So, statistics. Basically, there's 191 properties that are listed in the city that are currently operating as vacation rentals. And out of that 131 properties are subject to city code enforcement, which means we can enforce our current code against the 131 properties. As of now, we have already cited 109 of the 131 properties for operating without a certificate for vacation rental use. And as of to date, we have had, out of the 109, 56 properties have come into compliance because they've abstained from the use. They're no longer operating as a vacation rental. Currently, we have 44 properties that are in the application process, and 22 of those properties have been approved and are legal vacation rentals, and there's another 22 that are pending. And as of this week's date, we've taken 18 properties to hearings, and they do have fines pending on those properties. Basically, we have 7 properties that we've had a lot of complaints on, basically, and that goes back to about the mid-year 2018. Enforcement methodology, currently we're using STR Helper, and that basically researches the listings from multiple sites and provides us a confirmation with information needed so we can properly identify the locations of these properties and issue them a violation of notice. Enforcement NOV process. Basically, the spreadsheet, there's 2 ways it happens in the enforcement. It's proactive or reactive. During the proactive, we use STR Helper to help find locations. We issue an NOV, and then they're scheduled for a hearing if they don't get the license, and the magistrate will assess a fine of up to $250 a day. For those who do get the license, if they don't get the license in a timely fashion, they can still go to a hearing and go through the magistrate process and be fined on a daily basis until they get their approval. Once someone has submitted for the license, there's on-site inspections by code and building, which Mark has previously touched on. And once those are all passed, they have their certificate and they're approved. A little bit about the coordination between BSO and code compliance. Basically, we send our listings of every vacation rental that we have cited to BSO, as well as the contact information for emergency contacts. And we get incident reports from BSO and compare notes to, any problem sites or anything we've been having complaints on and how we can address that most effectively in a timely manner. And yeah,
Ulrich, the next couple of slides are for you. And I don't, I'd be sort of underestimating the teamwork between STR Helper and the city of Dania Beach, because we really couldn't do the enforcement that we're doing without his assistance. I mean, he's going to explain to you how his software works, but if anyone's ever tried to book a vacation rental, you'll see how frustrating it can be to get the address. Well, they have a proprietary software that's able to drag that information out of the internet and out of the different platforms and then boil it down to something that's usable for us. Otherwise, we'd be dealing with only complaints. So, Ulrich, you're up. It's your
Okay.
slide on that there's 469 short-term rentals in the city.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So the service we currently provide to Dania Beach is a service that we call address identification, which, as the name implies, essentially consists of scanning all of the major short-term vacation rental websites every couple of days to identify essentially the inventory of ads for rentals in the city. And then when we identify those ads, we sort of try to cross-reference everything that we see on these different websites with other data sources that can give us clues as to where these properties are actually located. And all of it distills down to a list of addresses as well as screenshots of those online listings, as well as explanations as to how we identify them. And one of the things that's very frustrating about short-term rentals is that a lot of times people will advertise the same physical property on a large number of websites. So right now there's 469 ads out there. We call those listings. If you go to the next page, where we talk about the duplicated properties, there's really only 191 actual physical rental units being rented out. So there's a lot of data management and detective work that goes into the service that we provide to Mark and the team. And the key here is that we essentially stay on top of the Dania Beach market. So Mark and his team can spend their time actually doing the enforcement work as opposed to doing all of this administrative desk detective work.
Thank you, Ulrich.
Mark, any other questions or more detail you want me to provide?
Well, we're gonna have a moment where we can do some Q&A. I've got just one last slide.
Perfect.
So that does kind of summarize what the law is, its origins, its limitations, and what the enforcement process is, and what some of the results of that enforcement has been. This slide deals with, sort of moving forward. And one of the things that we're fully aware of is that this is a pretty labor-intensive effort because there's just so many of them, and it's something that's ever-changing on a daily basis. So the fees that are in our city's resolution now may or may not be effective in covering the full cost. So one of the things that we want to do is look again at the fees to see if they can sort of bolster our revenues so that we can help pay some of the costs that may result in some additional resources to help us do this effort. Mr. Benzer's software is an example of that. And then we could work with STR Helper and Host Compliance to utilize some of their other services that they do have that could help us with not just data analysis, but also providing a service to our citizens and taking a little bit of the load off the shoulders of the administration. And then we've talked before about some possible code amendments, and we think there could be some potential for that. We may hear that in the questions a little bit later or in some comments. But I think it's probably important to put it in perspective that most jurisdictions are now starting to realize the effects of vacation rentals and the quality of their enforcement and the quality of their ordinances. And when there was the preemption law in 2011, it sort of had a chilling effect over the local jurisdictions about changing their codes. Some cities got left out of any code regulation at all. But that sort of chilling effect has been led also to some frustration by local jurisdictions. So there's some jurisdictions out there sort of stretching the bounds of that preemption law that we could look back to see how they're successfully doing some things that might be different, that might help us in Dania Beach. But those code amendments are something that we would have to look at very carefully and bring back to the commission, of course, for future consideration. And then there's we think we can get better with public information and a point of contact for the public when there is an issue with vacation rentals. So that's something that we want to look at improving in the near future, too. So with that, that kind of wraps up, our presentation, and we're available for any questions and comments from the commission and any public comment.
Commissioner James. Does anybody else? Vice Mayor?
So, Mark, those 56 properties that are no longer operating, how do we know they're no longer operating?
What we do is we look in STR Helper, which is a software program that scrubs the website that we talked about, the Ulrichs with, and we check and see if they're advertising again. And we haven't been able to verify that those 56 are re-advertising through the internet platforms.
But can't they just make, so I'm on there right now and I see, and I typed in Dania Beach. I want to rent a room in Dania Beach. So I have 306 hits. Several of these clearly aren't Dania Beach. They're like Hollywood or something like that. But so they just changed the name from come close to the beach or whatever. They keep it very vague. So how do you know that they don't just change the verbiage that they use in their advertisement, since they don't have to give the specific address as to where they're located on their ad, whatever you want to call it, their post?
There's a distinction between a user on their platform versus what Ulrich Benzer's business does for us. He actually provides us with addresses. So we can check the address over and over again. Once someone says they're in compliance and they approve it by pulling their advertisements off of the platforms, we can double check it to see that it stays off the platforms.
Okay.
Now, I suppose they could go underground and have a different way of advertising, but we also have given that list to our code enforcement officers, so they know that that was a previous address for Airbnb. So if we see some kind of activity that might lead us to believe that there's an Airbnb there or a vacation rental there, then we might follow up with that too.
And what is the fine that's assessed on them?
It's a maximum of $250 a day. They have to go to the magistrate to have the fine. They have to be found guilty before the magistrate, and he assesses the fine.
So in that moment, nothing happens. They just get the citation, and then they have to go through the process to find out if they'll be assessed whatever up to the maximum.
That's right. It's usually about 45 days to 60 days to get to the magistrate. Then by state law, the magistrate has to give a reasonable amount of time in order for them to come in compliance. Our recommendation is that it's almost immediate, because it's just simply pulling down their ad from the platform. And then the fine would begin after that point.
Mark, what would you say then is, what is the single most impactful thing a resident can do that's currently living next to a vacation rental that's burdensome for them? What is the best thing that they can do?
Not to steal a line from the chief, but it's if you see something, say something. It'd be to make a complaint to us. Because the complaint's going to come in one or two ways. It's either going to come in the proactive sense that Eric talked about, and that's looking through the websites, or it's going to come in from a phone call. And we'll follow up in either case. And if it's something that's a sort of public nuisance or quality of life issue, that's going to usually be more of a BSO matter, and they'll coordinate back with us.
Well, so perhaps this also ties into, one of the complaints that we get frequently with these vacation rentals is the noise issue. I know there's a million things, but the noise. I believe we have the residential noise ordinance coming up as well that, could help curtail, I don't know, some of these. I'm trying to think, for the person who's faced with it every weekend, having somebody new in there, it may not seem helpful to them that they have to wait that amount of time for the process to go through the magistrate and all that, and for that fine to be assessed. So I'm trying to think of what things they can do that are going to fix their situation in the moment, for those who are being kept up at night, for those who are having their quality of life impacted.
Well,
It's a
one of
big
the
thing.
things that will help, we're going to come forward to the commission in June, your next commission meeting on the 25th, with the first reading of a new noise ordinance. Our current noise ordinance is a little arcane and relies on a decibel meter and decibels that's administered by an expert in the business. So we're going to rewrite that so it's more of a practical approach to dealing with noise issues. The noise issues are going to probably be some of the most common issues, and parking would be too. So we think that with the change in the noise ordinance, it'll help a lot. And we also think that if we're a little more active in dealing with parking issues, that'll also help.
All right, thank you.
Just a quick question. I know you're also up, but couple of questions. What is the fee for someone to register their property?
It's just about, total is just about $600, because what it boils down to is you have to get a certificate of use, then you have to file an application for the vacation rental, then you have to have all the inspections. There's a charge for all the inspections. When you pass those inspections, you have to get a business tax receipt. So all those total up to approximately $600.
Okay, and I know one of the things you had on the slide, one of the slides up there was that there's a potential for increasing the fines per day in order to help dissuade people from violating the law, correct?
No, increasing the fees to help
Okay.
bolster the revenues to support the enforcement actions. The fines are limited by state law.
Okay, so there's nothing that we can do about that.
Only if it becomes a repeat violator, then the fines can get higher, which we'll see as time goes on. We'll have repeat violators of this ordinance.
Is there a point ever where somebody is such a repeat violator that their license can be revoked?
Yes, I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry.
When does that go? At what point?
That's something, if we see a pattern of behavior, we can bring it and we can suspend it or revoke it, and it's appealed to the city commission.
Okay, and that maximum of $250 fine for violations, does that include everything, like failing to register, noise ordinance? What does it include?
Yeah, you want to come up and help me out a little bit, Eric? Sure. Let the experts
The
speak.
max fine amount assessed by the magistrate basically goes to the case itself for whatever it's cited for. Usually it's a certificate of use, vacation rental certificate, and BTR. And so on a daily basis, it just goes on the case itself, not per fine. But one of the things that we are doing is once it becomes,
Yeah, you're not, yeah.
once it comes for abatement, we are not recommending that the fine be reduced to the magistrate, although he has the power to reduce it. But just simply because these properties can come into compliance by taking down the listing and showing evidence that they've stopped the use.
Okay. And I know you had numbers on there, the 191 total properties and the 131 that are actually, we can actually regulate. What are the other 60 properties? I know they're not included in the ordinance, but what type of properties are they?
They're almost all multifamily units. There's some mobile home units in there also.
And that's something that we could incorporate into a new ordinance, perhaps?
That's something that if the commission wants us to look at, we will do that. As I said a little bit earlier, cities are starting to push the limits of that preemptive provision of the state law, and we can look to see how maybe someone's doing it successfully or how it could be done successfully.
And my last question before I turn it over to Commissioner James. What about homeowners associations? Do homeowners associations have different responsibilities or different abilities to enforce the rules versus what we can do as a city?
Yeah. A lot of homeowners associations have a limited amount of time frame that a unit can be rented for. Like, for example, a 6-month is where it is in a lot of cases. So it's more seasonal and with approval to the board, and that anything other than that would be a violation of the association's rules. And some associations are very active in enforcing and some are not.
So reasonably then, if somebody belongs to a homeowners association that has bylaws, they could potentially amend those to limit or restrict vacation rentals from coming into their properties. Is that?
That's correct. Or they may have those bylaws already in effect.
Okay.
So you could
They would
ask
just
for
need to-
enforcement.
They just need to enforce them?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner James?
Yes. I had a thought about the last comment that was made. So we can have an ordinance that would allow us to enforce mobile homes on, as a part of this 131 that we're already enforcing with city code?
Well, what I've said is that there may be a possibility of that we're starting to hear that concern from our residents, that we can look back at it, but we'd want to come back to the commission after that's been thoroughly reviewed by our attorneys.
And the 131 properties, all of these have a BTR?
No, the 131 is what's offered today on the different platforms that are either single-family, duplexes, triplexes, or fours.
How many have a BTR?
22.
And the fine for the ones that don't have a BTR is just 250? Is there not something like a double fee if, like how you go get a permit and you do work without a permit, and then they double fee you for that?
Yeah.
Does that not, can we not do that with this because they're already operating a business without inspections or anything from the city?
The state law for code enforcement limits us to the 250 per day, which is the max that the magistrate, we have 18 findings by the magistrate, and he's assessed the maximum fine. We can go higher than that, but that's after they've been proven as a repeat violator. They have to come into compliance, go out of compliance, come into compliance and go out of compliance again. Then it can be the magistrate can set a higher rate.
So we can't put them out of business for not having a business tax receipt?
Well, at some point, it's going to get to be a
I just
bad
want to know how
business. It's
strict
gonna-
how strict we can enforce these things, especially if they're not in compliance, if they don't have a BTR. Can we put a stop business tag on it or something like we do like construction sites when they're not in compliance the same way? Can we do
No, we
this?
can't, no. The state doesn't allow us the opportunity to put a sort of a red tag on businesses.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Harris?
So when someone has a property owner has a hearing before a magistrate in 45 days, are they still allowed to operate, or do you find that they're still operating during that 45-day period once they're in the fine situation?
Yeah, well, they're allowed to operate until, we can't stop them from operating. The only thing we can do is assess the fine after the magistrate has found them guilty of a violation of the code. So that's why it can be very frustrating to the residents. I understand that. We have 109 NOVs out there. Probably a lot of the neighbors of those 109 properties may be concerned. We're already following up on it, but they may not come into compliance for months later.
Vice Mayor?
I have a question for the city attorney. So, what would happen if we did put something in place? Like I was reading about New Orleans, I think it was. They put in an ordinance to somehow, I don't know, ban them or limit the number of Airbnbs that were allowed to operate within city limits, something like that. What's the process of what would happen if we did that?
Okay, we are precluded by the state law. It's been there since 2011 and was changed in 2014 from prohibiting anybody from doing these. So you just can't prohibit them. We can regulate them by making them get the certificate. And for people, a BTR means what we call business tax receipt. Used to be called local occupational license. It's really an authorized tax that cities are allowed to impose. It doesn't have a lot of, doesn't really do anything regulatory. It's a revenue thing, but we use it to show if you don't have it, you're in violation, and then we come to what's called this code magistrate. That's a hearing officer, and then impose these daily fines. So the daily fines, if you think about $250 a day times 30 days, you're talking $9,000 a month. Other cities are, as we get farther into this progress, we are then able, if they lose their homestead, and they should if they're operating these regularly, they're not homestead, we turn them over to the property appraiser to see whether or not they are violating their homestead. When they lose that, now we have the ability to go after them and foreclose on the property, which we might have to do a couple times just to get the message across.
Have we ever done that so far?
We haven't gotten to that point yet, but we're working towards that kind of thing as people repeat. Do you have any repeat violators yet, Mark?
No, we don't.
Okay, so.
No, we don't, but we do notice the property appraiser that the use has changed. It's operating now as a more similar to a commercial use than a homesteaded use. And then they'll change their taxes, and then in time, if they lose their homestead and the fine goes up high enough, we could threaten to
In
foreclose.
time, though, in time.
Well,
In time.
the state law requires us, you have to have at least, unfortunately, again, there's a different state law, Chapter 162, that governs code and compliance proceedings, and that requires that you have at least wait for 3 months before you can seek to foreclose on a property. So these progress steps are there, but the good thing is we are already in the midst of some of them. Again, he's saying we don't even have a repeat violator. We're just trying to stay on top of the ones we've got. It's kind of a whack-a-mole situation, as you can imagine, but with this help of this gentleman who's helping us on identifying them, we're getting a much better handle on it. The frustration we share with the constituents here is the parking, the noise. Those are the things we're trying to do a better job at to get relief for them faster. And if we have to use the county court system, perhaps that's a way to do it when the noise violations are bad or when the parking is so bad that the fines are not enough. So you get a county judge then to hear it, and sometimes that's a different opportunity for a forum, something different for enforcement. We haven't gone that point yet because we haven't been frustrated with the code process yet.
Commissioner James, did you have something else?
Yes, I forgot to ask Mark this question. And this is something that I've heard regularly from a lot of our residents. How do we enforce certain things like right now? Minimum of 5 days or a maximum 2 persons per bedroom so we can't enter the property, or, must have a registered agent, or not to exceed 10 persons. How if I have a home and I have someone living next to me that I know is having a house party or a big sleepover, like how do our residents enforce that, like right then and right there, or is there not a way? Because saying, if they're caught in violation, but who's regulating this? Who's policing these? Are the residents policing these Airbnbs, or?
Well, you can imagine how difficult that is to get that evidence. That evidence would be upon discovery, meaning that the police would show up. This is why them providing the incident reports to us is important. If the police is called out and their incident report concludes that there were this many guests and it goes beyond the maximum, or that there was evidence that their stay there was below the 5 minimum, then we'll use that and bring it to the code enforcement magistrate.
But then isn't that dangerous to have our residents now being police officers or detectives, or saying that they have to give them evidence of how are they going to really give evidence? And can the police just go into someone's home?
No, that's what I'm saying. Maybe I misspoke. I'm sorry if I did. What I meant to say was that if there's a call and a BSO officer is there, and he gets the incident, he writes up the incident, and it includes in his report less than 5 days, more than the maximum, then we'll use that as the evidence to bring it to the magistrate. So it would be a matter of, it's upon discovery by BSO or by code enforcement that we could enforce it. We wouldn't be able to enforce those regulations sort of in a premature situation. It's going to have to be upon discovery. We're going to have to witness it.
Can they go inside the homes though? Like if I had a BSO officer and I'll just say, no, they're not staying, they're just visiting, then what? Like how do you?
Yeah.
That's just
tough. The same thing.
luck.
Our code enforcement officers can knock on the door and ask questions and get information that's given to us. Unless there's some other reason for BSO to go deeper into the residence, it would be the same sort of discovery.
Okay.
I just have one quick question and then a couple of comments for everybody, and then we're going to open it up to the public. If I'm understanding correctly, then the fines that are imposed, and I don't know if this is a question for you or a question for you, but the fines that get imposed, it's a maximum of $250 per day, so it could be less than that, correct? That's correct?
Yes, but I think the recommendation has been consistently to do the maximum per day.
Per day, okay.
So that's the code staff going to the magistrate. We have 2 different magistrates, and they are aware of the city's concern with this issue as a very hot issue and a quality of life. So we ask for the maximum, and we get that order.
And that does not start to accrue until after the magistrate finds that they violated the ordinance.
That's correct. But again, as Mark points out, and what happens is it's so easy to have them comply by taking down off the platforms the ads. And if we find 2 days later they're still there, now we tag them for the days that the ads remained, and we'll start to come back to the magistrate on dates A through X. Here's how we saw the ads. The magistrate can then impose the fine, and the fine is, their last resort is to go to circuit court.
Okay. And just a couple of comments, just to update people on some things. I spoke to Representative Chip LaMarca on Friday about this because he actually had a bill that he presented to the House this past session. It was heard in the House. I believe it was passed in the House, but it never went. It was never heard in the Senate, right? And when I spoke to him about it, he actually said that it's probably not going to be brought up again the next session, and they're probably going to wait another year, primarily because of the current climate in Tallahassee with regard to these issues, which is not favorable to the local cities. They may bring it up, they may not, but it may not because of the current concerns, and there's certain people up there right now that are really pushing to keep the state regulating everything and not allow the cities to do it. So write to your Congress people, write to your representatives is just what I'm going to throw out there to everybody. The other issue is, you mentioned the homestead issue and working with the property appraiser. That's something that I'm already doing. And we're going to have a presentation by Marty Carr, hopefully in the next couple of meetings, because he's actually doing some investigation for us with regard to utilities in comparison to locations to see, and part of that is going to help us identify some of these properties, I think. So they're still working on it. It takes a little longer because we have Broward out west, different water. It's not city water, so it's taking a little bit longer. We were hoping to have it done by now, but it will be coming up. And I think that's going to, not only is it going to earn some income for the city, but it's also going to identify some of these problems. And we may be able to identify more of these properties, and we'll get that information to you as well. Okay, with that, I want to open this up to the public. I know people do have questions. If you have a question, just come up, state your name and address, and we're going to limit you to 3 minutes. And just, we don't have our normal process, but if you each come up one at a time, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Charlotte Sloboda, 2905 Lakeshore Drive, Dania Beach. I have a twofold question. Community I live in is a property owners association. Now, our covenants and bylaws state that when you purchase a house, you can only rent your house out one time, whether it's one day or for the whole year. So does that supersede, our covenants supersede all of the others?
Yes, that's what we were talking about before. I think a property owners
I wanted to
association,
make sure.
it's probably the same as a homeowners association, right?
Yes, same thing.
Okay, so there's a whole statute, Chapter 720 governs what
Right.
we call HOAs. But yes, since our law does not apply to things over 5 units, and yours is well over, several hundred units, I suppose, right, that belong to the association?
794.
So your rules and your regulations or covenants are controlling. Ours does not even apply to you.
Okay, my next half to my question is, now, property owner bypasses us, doesn't even come to the association, goes straight to the city and applies for an application, goes through all the applications and gets everything approved. If you're not aware that it's in our community and that we have a bylaw, is it still, or he's breaking the law?
Now, I think what you'll find that we will know by when that person applies and with their address, that's not something we have jurisdiction over. That's a POA, a Property Owners Association,
So-
and we don't issue BTR licenses or certificates for those units. So
You would-
they'll
you
be
would
sent,
issue them?
they'll be sent away, and they cannot obtain a certificate of vacation rental from the city because they're not 4 units or less. So
Okay.
your rules or your covenants are going to control.
Okay, thank you.
Please state your name and address and limit it to 3 minutes. Thanks.
Eileen Snyder, 3061 Cove Drive, Estates of Fort Lauderdale, at Dania Beach. I agree with a lot of what Charlotte said. I have a comment to make to the public. We need better snitches. That's what it's all about. A question I have, that one house in our community that received a license from the state, I don't understand. They named a manufactured house a hotel restaurant. Did you know about these kind of things? Then they applied for an occupational license from Dania Beach, and they received it as a hotel restaurant. Now, I noticed they're expired, but they're still sitting in the windows.
I think you need to report that address to Mark before you leave.
Thank you, that's it.
Please state your name and address, and we'll be limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Sean DeRosa, 408 Southeast 5th Street. Two things before I get started is, just out of the box, I don't think our fees are adequate. I think that's a gift to these folks. I think at a bare minimum, you need to come up with a budget where the fees at least can cover the cost of the staff in City Hall and cover the cost of 2 additional BSO officers to play hotel security guard and regulate these folks. I heard Mr. LaFerrier say that he hasn't had any repeat violators. That's kind of shocking and surprising to me, since I've sent photographic evidence, time, date stamped, probably a dozen times to Mr. Ansbro, city manager, to the entire commission on 402 Southeast 5th Street. So when Commissioner James says, how are the residents going to have this stuff enforced? Are they supposed to be playing detective? I've sent it 12 times now, and you've had your director just come up here and share that there's no incidence of a repeat violator. Is somebody going to investigate that now tonight? Why 402 Southeast 5th Street has not been brought up at special magistrate as a repeat violator? At this point, looking at the way the ordinance is written, I believe it's 3 strikes and you're out in terms of revocation of your license. So I'm surprised 402 Southeast 5th Street isn't even up for revocation of their license. You've all seen the photographic evidence. I think we do need a better tracking methodology of who's coming and going to these residences. I don't know if it's we want plates, models, years of cars. Is it a stash house for a couple of days? I know you mentioned a minimum of 5 days. I can tell you, I live next door to one. Sometimes it's 1 night, 2 nights. Very rarely is it 5 days. The worst episode I had was the party would start at 2 a.m. and go to about 5:30 a.m. And I thought, okay, that's just 1 night. You know, hopefully they're not going to do this. It went 5 nights in a row. And I sent you all the security screenshot videos. I got BSO involved. Did BSO create any incident reports for that? That was 5 nights in a row, being woken up at 2 a.m. through 5:30 a.m. with a party next door. So these are just a few things. I hope this won't be our only public workshop. I hope we can still come together and exchange ideas, and we can get to the bottom of preserving our quality of life, preserving the value of our single-family residential community, and preserving the safety of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner James?
Yes, I have a question, I guess, for Mark about that last, about Sean's comment. How do we, I'm sorry, could you let Mark answer me first? He needs the mic. Sorry.
That's okay.
How do we identify if someone is a repeat violator? I know we're all familiar with Sean's emails and pictures and with various things. So how do we identify if someone is a repeat violator, and if it's BSO called out, does that count? Or I'm a little confused now.
Well, I mean, I think that situation kind of describes a lot of the frustration that people can have sometimes. But in order to be a repeat violator, you have to come back into compliance and then go out of compliance again. This is the statutory definition of a repeat violator. It's not a city code. And just so you understand, that property went to hearing to our magistrate in July of last year. It collected a fine, and I think that fine, at $250 a day, I think it was almost $50,000. They've gone through the application process. They're ready for that application to be approved, but we can't approve it until they pay the fines. So
but they can still operate?
They may still be operating. Yeah, they're still operating, so the fines are still accruing, even though the application is pending approval, but we can't issue the approval of the application until they pay the fines.
So
this is the frustration that we have from the state law promulgating down to the city how we do code enforcement.
Okay.
Come on up.
No, the due date's passed. The due date's been passed for over a year. there's a $55,000 fine.
So that, Mark, may be one that, if it hasn't gone to the property appraiser to revoke the homestead exemption, it should, and then we'll take it to foreclosure. Let's make an example of somebody.
Come on up, Patricia. Please state your name and address.
Patricia Favor, 200 Southeast Fifth Avenue. And I live in a condo, so I know what you were saying earlier. But my question is, oh, yeah, that worked. No wonder we can't hear anybody. My question is, we know that people are using their condos as Airbnbs, and we see the people coming and going. And our condo association, I guess, could fine them if we had a fines thing. But can we call and report them to the police for noise but if they're not making noise, do we have any recourse, I guess, is my question.
Again, a noise violation is a police matter, and therefore the police can investigate that.
But as far as people coming and going,
That's where you need to go to your board to say, you know this is going on, because we've told you about it, and I want you board members to do what you're supposed to do to enforce against the owner of the unit the requirement to, whatever the rental restriction is for your condominium. Almost every condominium has, like this Earl said before, no more than 30 days a year, or no more than twice 30 days a year, whatever it is, as long as that can be established, then your own board should be able to impose, through its own system of fines, to make that owner stop doing that. And then if they don't, it's a lien on that unit, typically under your laws, your regulations.
thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
City Manager?
Yes, what I wanted to do was address the noise ordinance that we have in place that's very archaic, and it also does not allow us to really be able to go after these people that are disrupting the quality of life of our residents. We started working several months ago with our vice mayor and Mark and the whole team. What we have done is begin to take the first step, which is residential construction and also non-residential construction. Now, at the June 25th meeting, we're going to bring a continued noise residential ordinance that's going to address the noise, loud music, and more disruptions that allows us to even be able to enforce even more, not just us in code, but also BSO. So within the next month, we're going to continue to put more teeth in that ordinance that we're putting together for you.
Come on up. Please state your name and address.
Yes. Luis Bello, Estates of Fort Lauderdale Property Owners Association, 2850 Southwest 54th Street. My only concern is that, can we get collaboration from the city, like the permit department does, that there is a section on the application that demands for you to get approval from the association prior to submitting the license or the certificate of use? Because the permit department does that. We have to give them an approval first, and that is submitted to you, and then you give them the permit. Can we get that same type of collaboration?
You're in the estates, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, you're not subject to the city's ordinance.
Okay.
You have to rely upon your board to turn the people in. As the lady said, you need the snitches to turn them in, and your board has to fine the owner for violating your regulations.
Okay.
So
in other words,
turning it
you're
over to
going
the
to give
city
them the
won't help-
license,
it
because
won't
that's
help
what we
you.
have found.
It
You
won't
are
help-
giving them the license, okay.
Right.
And we just have to find them.
Right,
Okay.
but again, the city can't help on that. We understand that most home associations, which is what you have, and condominiums, want to control their own destiny of how many people get to rent and how often.
Exactly.
You don't want to have the city tell you, here's what the law is, and it applies to you.
Okay.
That's why we don't have laws that govern those kinds of things.
Okay,
We
but they,
left it to you to.
they do that in the permit department to get a license to do a construction or anything else. They do have it on the application that you need to get POA approval first. So I was just requesting if it's possible to do it in the certificate of use application. Something to consider.
Mark, is there a difference? I mean, can you explain the difference with that?
Well, yes, we do require that they give us evidence that they've notified the HOA when there's a permit application. I think what the young lady's asking for is that same sort of notice be included with the certificate of use application. I hate this thing. It just doesn't work very well, right? But we'll modify our applications to include that, even though we don't regulate in mobile home parks, but I can include it with the certificate of use applications, so that if there is a request for even a rental of any kind, that way the association is aware of the application.
And it cannot do under that. We need to look at that to make sure we're doing it the right way.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Okay. Next, behind you. Just come on up. Please state your name and address.
Hi. My name is Simone Chait. God, I just went blank on my address. Okay. 228 Southeast 8th Street, Dania Beach. I've been up in front of you before regarding all of this. First of all, I want to thank Mark and Eric for helping us on 8th Street. They've been really great. They did catch the people on our street, and I know everybody always criticizes everything, but I want to thank them very, very much, first of all, for doing what they've done in their job, for limited help they have. My question is, like this gentleman had talked about, we get these people, they never get cleared, in a sense, to operate. They keep operating. We keep finding them. When is too much? When have we said it's too much? This is $50,000, $40,000. When is it too much that they get a foreclosure on that property? Because at this point, they're saying to the community that lives around them, we're going to do whatever we want when we want to, because we have no license. So when is it too much, or when do you decide enough is enough?
I'm not sure that there isn't a number that, okay, when they get to $50,000, now you're in trouble. It's however egregious, and it sounds like that whatever you're talking about is, if they continue, we just have to work with the code compliance people, show that despite the fact that they've been cited and they're stalling or whatever they're doing, once we can get them, first of all, they must lose their property tax exemption. Because if they have homestead, we can do all the fines we want. You can't do anything until they sell the property or try to get a mortgage on it. But they can run, people run up fines to the hundreds of thousands of dollars in this city and others because they can't be prosecuted. You can't take their property away. Once they lose the homestead exemption, yes, Mark and Eric can come to us and tell us this one is a candidate for foreclosure.
It's a business, though.
Well, it's a business, but it's a business in a residential area. So you're allowed to do that on there's limitations, but not like that where you're talking about where they don't comply with our law. We have a very good law. We're trying to work harder to get it, enforced.
Okay, and going to BSO also, when there's more than, he has set limits on, like, if it's a 3-bedroom, 10 people, we have to call BSO. We have to call BSO and say, hey, there's, 30 people there at the house. There's cars all over. When BSO comes out, they have to take our name and we're part of the report, or will they just do a drive-by? If we say, hey, this is a resident here, we've got Airbnb, they're having parties, there's cars all over the street, all over the yard, there's people coming and going, it's 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, do you have to come and get me out of my bed and say, okay, so-and-so, you're reporting it, we're putting you in the report? Or can we just do it?
The police chief is here, and he can come up and address it. You just call it in.
We just have to call it in?
That's it, call me. That's how we know stuff's going on. We gotta know about it, we respond there, take care of it, we forward it to code enforcement, and then they can take action that following day if it's one of the overnight type.
But if it's happening if it's 12 o'clock at night, and I'm sure, 12 o'clock at night, can you come out and help us out? We
Yes.
need it now, not
Yes.
tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes.
Can they stop that from happening once it's there?
If there's anything against the law, we will stop it.
I mean, at 1 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the morning, that should be against the law.
I know.
And that should be able to stop that.
Sandra, wait till you come up, because.
Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, you had something?
Yes, and we're going to push the envelope as we can push it when it comes to the law. We had a very, very weak and non-existent ordinance that didn't address the things that we're going to address now that are going to be able to help us. Going back to a discussion that I had a month and a half with the mayor. When we get people and they're losing their homestead exemption, and we're working with our city attorney to begin to take the steps that we've never taken before in regards to foreclosure, then that's how we're going to be able to stop this. But this has to be a full court press from all of you, working with all of us, working with code, working with police, and working as a team. But you can remain anonymous. And now when you call us, because there's noise and there's things that are disrupting you, now, like the chief said, we are able to get them because they're actually violating a code ordinance. Right now, a lot of these noise issues that you're having, we can't get them because they're not breaking a law. We're making our law now stricter for you.
Sandra, come on up. Please state your name and address.
I hate talking to mics, but my name is Alexandra Kralik, and I live at 205 Northeast First Court. I guess I've had this short-term rental. I'm not even sure when it ended, except for one day I came home, and there was like a million cars, people everywhere, all kinds of things happening at this house, and then I find out from my other neighbors that this has been happening, and they have all been calling and inquiring about it. And I had no idea how to even find out if this address was, approved, how many people are allowed to stay there, and so forth. And if you do call the police, we would hope that they would make them leave or make them move the vehicles or something would happen at that time. But apparently they come and they do whatever report and everything stays the same, and then what happens? So I guess I came a little bit late. I didn't know if there's a way to check the address to find out if it is approved, how many people are allowed to be there, because clearly 20, 30 people in a two-bedroom house, way too many. Like I said, I had no idea even that this was happening right next door to my nice dead-end quiet street that I wanted to move to in Dania Beach, because it is a nice dead-end street until now. And so after residents, how do we know when something like this is coming up for sale as a bed and breakfast or as a short-term stay? Is there any way for us to know this?
Mark?
Hello. One of the things that I talked about a little bit earlier as improvements. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry about that. One of the things I talked about earlier under improvements, we could post the list that we get as vacation rentals that are being advertised. Someone could go to the website and see. So we're hoping to have that up on our website and build a little page for that on vacation rentals. Where we can get information. Remember I said we need to get better on public information.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Can we maybe post it somewhere so that anybody can access it? But also, what about violations? If somebody already has a violation, is there some place that we can post that, or would that be a legal problem?
We can do that also.
That's a public record.
Yeah.
Public record.
Yeah, Eric's holding a
But again-
database in his hand now
Well-
that could be published.
Well, my concern is that if they haven't seen the magistrate yet.
It wouldn't matter.
Okay.
If there's a complaint out there and there's a written record of it, even if it's anonymous, there's the record and the public is entitled to ask for it. You don't have to identify yourself. You don't have to give us your address. You just come in and ask for it. We have a process to go through and we will retrieve it for you.
So then we could post not only who's applied for one of these, we could post the ones that are listed already.
Yes.
And we could also post whoever's had a violation against them.
That's correct.
Okay. Sounds
And
good.
the
Yeah.
ones that were made legal through a certificate.
Okay. Come on up, Sandra, you got to talk into them. He's taking down notes here.
I just want to find out how long that application takes for them to go through all that.
Mark can answer that for you again.
Sure. A lot of times the success of the applicant it really dictates, how quickly an application can be approved or denied. But we're typically seeing that it's at least a 2 to 6 month process. Remember, they go through a full inspection of the house. If we find that they did work without a permit, then that means they got to stop and get a permit, which means they may have to do some remedial work on the construction aspect of their home. So it's about 2 to 6 months.
Okay, thank you. Next, please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Gaia Calcaterra, and the address is 513 Northeast 2nd Street in Dania Beach. And I would just like to take a moment to present the other side. Too loud? How's that? Good. Yeah, just to present the other side of the argument too, and just so that everyone's aware, I'm very, very for people cracking down and noise ordinances and all of that. I own a vacation rental property here in the city of Dania Beach and one in Fort Lauderdale, so I've already been through this whole process with the city of Fort Lauderdale, and I comply with everything, okay? We have all the licenses and all of that. So I bought this property in Dania Beach in 2015 when the city didn't even have the possibility of registering it as a vacation rental. And I even registered it with Tallahassee as a vacation rental. And come to, 25th of March of this year, we get this notice of violation on the front door. So we start calling the city, and it takes numerous phone calls, numerous visits to find out what the whole process and procedure is. And a month later, we finally find out, and I get this whole form. And again, I'm happy to comply with all of it, but the cost is really $800 with just about every inspection under the sun. You know, the city of Fort Lauderdale, for example, only requires for smoke alarms, exit signs, noise ordinances. And I think this is quite hefty on people who are trying to comply, people who have rehabbed their properties, people who maintain their properties. I mean, I do all the maintenance on it. It's in my best interest to run a property that is kept well because it works on reviews. And it's not only these, but it's also the licenses with the city of Tallahassee. So again, you know, we came into the city, started the whole compliance process. It's taken 2 months and 7 emails to 4 different people, all copied in the city, to get, I still don't have a reply. So I don't know where I'm sitting with the notice of violation. I've requested to what the process is to get the hearing heard and to get the notice of violation times extended so that we can go through the whole inspection process, because you guys are asking for things like the inspection of a hose bib. I don't even know what that is. So, you know, to take the time to find out these things, and where I'm all for the safety of the people, quietness of properties. I mean, I don't find that these things are for regular rentals, okay? So I think there's like quite a bit of unfairness, and I think the people who are trying to comply are being heavily, heavily penalized. And, you know, so I'd like the city to be mindful of that when making all these heavy rules, because in all those numbers, I mean, you're looking at 191 properties, but really 7 complaints. And so I'm all for cracking down on those complaints, but don't like destroy the people who are actually trying to make it work and trying to, you know, revitalize homes and look after properties. That's it. Thank you.
I'm sure you could talk to Mr. LaFerriere when this is done about your situation, but I want to, you can probably address this for me. Those 7 complaints, those are the ones that are reactive, right? I mean, my understanding is that there's a bunch of properties that you've actually found without anybody calling and that
Yes.
have violated. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
The 7 would be reactive, and we've got 131 that are proactive.
And those are the ones that you've received, or you haven't received
No, we haven't
complaints
received
on?
any complaints. We just, through the help of Mr. Benzer's company, we can identify which ones are being advertised as vacation rentals. That may be where this one came up.
And those have received notices of violations?
Yeah, we
if there
issue
have
the
been
notice
issues.
of violation real time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner James?
Yes. Mark, who's in charge? Oh. Mark, who's in charge of, who's the point person when a business like this comes and is willing to be in compliance and sending 7 emails and not getting a response, I don't find that very, responsible on our end. So who's the point person for this?
The point starts in the planning and zoning division. So it'd be planning and zoning that accepts the application,
No,
walks the
who do we
applicants
send?
through.
Who do we send? Like, who would we send her to? Would we send her to you? Would we send her to Corinne? Would we send her to Eric? Like, who's?
Planning and zoning has their 4 staff members that could help her out.
Okay, so Corinne.
That's,
Okay.
Corinne's the planning and zoning manager.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Please state your name and address.
Hi, Pat Chuckerman, 545 Southeast 4th Court, Dania Beach. So I have one of these across the street from my house. I've been very lucky that they've been very well behaved. But my question is, how many people do we have, staff members, in the code compliance department who are actually actively out there, and do we need more?
Mark?
Okay, thank you, Pat. Well, it's sort of a shared responsibility. Everybody, about everybody in planning and zoning gets to be involved with vacation rentals, and everybody on code staff, but really primarily the type of work that's being done that you've heard about tonight is really Eric's heavy lifting, and he's the manager of code compliance.
Can I add to that? Would it make sense to have a point person for this, who's, well, in the greatest sense, is she in charge of like all of this with all the keeping up after it?
Yeah, this and all the other enforcement of all of our other codes, that's Eric's job. Some cities do have.
Eric or Corinne?
No, Eric. Eric's responsible for compliance. Corinne starts the application process.
Right.
But there's, as you can see, there's only 44 applications in process, but 130 some that are subject to city regulation. So Eric's involved with sort of all those properties and in the full process all the way through from beginning to end, either as it results in a certificate or as it results in a violation.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of if there was a way to, we get obviously a ton of these emails of this is what's going on, what do I do, here's the pictures. The woman in the back who shared her experience coming from the other end, copying 4 different people on it. Someone else mentioned that they had reported something several times. So it was one person, but you're saying it's either Corinne or Eric.
Well, if it's an application, it's going to go to planning and zoning. And then the travels through a whole process that ends up with Eric's division. If it's a violation or a complaint, then it starts in code compliance and with Eric.
And Mark, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, and I know Eric is dying to say something, but you and I had talked about this earlier, and I had suggested that maybe we need some sort of a hotline or a specific email address or something. I know we don't get a ton of complaints to the city specifically. They do come to us. But maybe there might be some way to have like a one email address or one phone number or both where people are aware that anything to do with vacation rentals, whether front end or the back end, maybe that's something we need to do. I know we have a specific phone number for homeless issues that goes to BSO. Maybe we need something like that for the city that deals specifically with vacation rentals, that front end and back end.
I think we can get better with public information.
All right.
I agree.
Okay. Eric is dying to say something. So
Eric, you want to give us some?
Yeah, she has to speak.
Oh,
that's okay. Go ahead.
So Corinne is one person, Eric is one person. Unless they're working 48 hours a day, it seems to me that we need more staff to help them and more staff to be able to deal with these issues.
Well, go ahead, Eric. I'll let you speak
Just
first.
real quickly, we will make an email address that will be Vacation Rentals. We'll have it put on the website, and we will, coming up very shortly, have all the statistics posted, so anyone can go online to find out if there's a pending application, pending code case, or any other information. And as of right now, I do have all vacation rental property complaints to me, because I personally am overseeing the stats on all this and trying to make sure the city's other code violations are also dealt with as well as these.
That's, I was going to suggest that we make sure that your email and phone number is given out tonight for everybody, and maybe put it in the minutes as well, so go right ahead and do that.
Okay. My direct phone number is 54924-6810, extension 3703.
And louder into the mic.
954-924-6810, extension 3703. And my email address is ewalton, WALTON, @daniabeachfl.gov.
Thank you. Roberta.
Roberta Grimmer, 5250 Southwest 22nd Terrace Avenue, Dania Beach. My question has to do with a lot of our community is it's a second home, but they come down themselves for the winter, but perhaps they want to rent out for a week or two when they go back north at Christmas time. Will they be subject to the same code compliance?
Go ahead, Tom.
Is this a single-family home you're talking about? Yes, that home, if they choose to do that for 5 days, that's the minimum they can do it. So they can't do it less than that. So if it's 5 days or more, they are supposed to register us.
But again, if we have a homeowners association, we could write that in there that they could, in fact,
If you have what's called a homeowners association, which
Right.
exists under the state law, we will not do that for you.
Okay.
We would want you to control your own destiny, because we find HOAs and condos like to control their own property. They don't want the city meddling with it.
Right.
You know what you want that serves you best.
Okay.
For how many people, like, for example, if they're doing that once a year for 7 days, that may be okay with your rules.
right. Okay, thank you.
Sean, name and address again, please.
Yes, Sean DeRosa, 408 Southeast Fifth Street. With regard to the repeat violations, I heard Mr. LaFerrier say that the violation had to be closed out. It could take 6 months to 2 years to 5 years before you could cite the person as a repeat violator. Is that something does that make sense to you all? Is that logical? And secondly, is that something that we can address when we do amend the ordinance? With regards to establishing another phone number, if these are going to become quasi-judicial matters, don't we need a documented paper trail? We want to just start leaving phone messages in the abyss on something like this. I think that sets the wrong precedent. If someone needs to call someone, call 911. You just said Chief Marks is going to help us. Chief Marks has heard from me. He heard from me that week when he had to be sending officers over there from 2 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. So I think that's the wrong approach, just to say, here's a phone number and call it. I call code enforcement right now. There's like 5 different prompts. Push this if you need that. Push that if you need this. And then who verifies and confirms that that was even picked up? So I think that's the wrong approach here right now. I think if there's going to be a complaint pertaining to these vacation rentals, it needs to be documented, verified, and confirmed. Also, when they register with their application, the agent that's representing that property, there should be an email address on that, so we can copy them so that we can prove that we did notify them. Right now in the current ordinance, you give them like 4 hours to remedy the matter. That's inappropriate. If you went to a hotel and someone's noisy in the next door room, they get security in that hotel up there in a matter of 15 minutes. If I'm trying to enjoy the quiet enjoyment of my home at night or during the weekend, I got to wait 4 hours? Are you kidding me? It shouldn't be any more than 30 to 45 minutes. You're running a business there. You need to handle it and allow for the people that are there before you in a single-family residential community. We were there before vacation rental to enjoy the quiet enjoyment of our homes. 4 hours doesn't make sense to me. And pertaining to the noise, just call BSO. Call BSO. So is there any punitive remedy to that? Do they get fined $500 for noise? If I have steak bones in my backyard thrown, like I've had, or cigarettes repeatedly thrown in my backyard, is there a fine for that? Or is it oh, just send an email and we'll try to get to it. I mean, these are things you have to think about. I mean, you don't realize it. Show up at these places, they have no respect for the neighbors that are next door. Who throws cigarettes over the neighbor's fence? Or throws steak bones over the fence? Or throws gum over the fence? It doesn't make any sense. And I've sent you photos and all this. Thank you.
Just going to say that one of the reasons why we're having this workshop is to hear what everybody is saying. So go ahead, Candido.
Candido Sosa Cruz, Assistant City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, residents. I just want to add a little bit more of what Eric Walton said earlier as far as addressing short-term rental violations and any other code violations. We have 5 code compliance officers that are designated 5 different zones of the city. On top of that, we have a supervisor, and then we have Eric Walton, the manager. On top of that, we have an assistant director for the department and a director of the department. So we have a full team addressing not just all violations, but specifically short-term rental violations. The manager's office, in which I'm in, and the city manager, we also address any and all violations, complaints, concerns. As far as short rentals goes, it's a team effort. It's a team effort that involves code compliance, the planning and zoning employees, the building department, the building inspectors, the police department, the fire department, and some of the future plans we have include having more technology in which you could go either on an app on your phone, report the violation, or search to see if a property has violations or has an actual license. Additionally, part of our future plans is to go to all the homeowner associations, meaning the team that involves planning and zoning, building, code compliance, BSO, and explain what we're explaining today. Because a lot of the questions we're getting, the city doesn't have any oversight as far as the homeowners association. But there are other things that the city does do, which is address noise complaints, address parking violations, address any other violations that comes with the short-term rental activity, but not directly involves a short-term rental violation. So I just want everyone to know and to be aware that this is a first step of a multi-step approach in addressing any and all violations. I want to meet with this gentleman because it seems like there's a lot of violations that he's aware of, and I want to make sure that we are providing that high level of service that we keep saying we're doing, but if someone is not experiencing it, then it needs to get to the manager's office so we could directly see where are things falling off and not being completed. So I want to say again that this is just the first step of a multi-step approach in addressing short-term rental violations and any and all violations that residents are witnessing and experiencing in the city. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing just real quickly. And there was a comment made that when something like this happens, you should call 911. Please do not call 911 for these issues. 911 is for emergencies. I just want to make sure that that's out there. And
Mayor, I object to that. 2 o'clock in the morning?
I understand.
Okay? I object to
911,
that.
but that's fine. But 911 is supposed to be for.
What is that? At
Please.
2 o'clock in the morning?
Hold up. Sit back down. Sit down. You need to sit down. You need to sit down. Okay, there's no arguing in the gallery. If you're going to continue arguing in the gallery, we will have you removed. Just want to make sure that people understand the real purposes behind 911. Chief Marks is more than welcome to address that if he'd like.
We have a non-emergency number, and dispatch will send a deputy immediately, and we'll get the music turned down.
Thank you. Come on up. Please state your name and address.
Yes, good evening. My name is Pilar Rodriguez, 5189 Southwest 28th Avenue in Dania Beach. I've been a resident of Dania Beach for the last 6 years. I bought a home that was very old, or is still very old, but I have beautified and I have worked very hard in order for me to maintain this house. Now, I am with the young lady at the very end that came and spoke in favor of the vacation rental. I want to clarify, I don't do it. It's not my business. I have my job, so does my husband. However, in every situation, it's very important that we weigh both sides. I understand it is a nuisance in some areas. Looks is very disturbed by his neighbors, but it is very well known, and I work in property management, that the resident or the people that use Airbnb are actually the best behaved guests that you can imagine, even better than your family members. They are also, actually no, it is also well known because when they leave, the person that owns the property and rented the property reviews that guest the same way the guest reviews the property. So if the guest gets bad reviews, guess what? They cannot rent anywhere else. So, saying that, my purpose of this thing is wait on both sides, and a lot of people have come with some really good ideas about having an office or a person to regulate, to follow all these regulations that I want to be put in place and follow on them and make it quick, like for this lady. So I saw that the fees are very steep. Let's be honest, it's $800 to register, whatever. You take $50 out of that application to put it in a budget to pay a person just to handle this. Just an idea, something you want a phone call or you want an 800 number or something like that. Just use it because it's not going to go away. We all know it. That's not going to go away. It's the industry. It's happening. Now, it does beautify. Some of the people that do it do beautify their homes. Some areas have been enhanced because of this. And maybe some owners should learn from this and start beautifying their homes. Thank you.
Commissioner James?
Yes, I have a question for the city manager. Where are we going next with this? I mean, because we can sit here and do this all night long, but what are the next steps? Are we as a commission going to submit these suggestions and we can come up with? I just want to know, and I'm sure everyone else wants to know, outside of this, all of this dialogue, what's next?
And that's a very good question. One of the things that I was discussing today with the city attorney is that we had a workshop, was it back in January or February, before I became your manager. And the dialogue has been ongoing. We scheduled a workshop today, but like our assistant city manager said, we're not going to let this go. When I hired an assistant city manager, I also hired someone that has the highest level of certification in code. So basically what we did, we added another team player to our city team that is an expert in this. We have certain restrictions from the state, but like I said earlier, we're going to push that envelope as much as we can push it. We're not going to find the solutions tonight, but we're continuing to take steps. Just today, we talked about publicly listing all our short-term rentals, the status of all our short-term rentals, and everything that we're going to do in regards to bringing everybody to code. But it didn't start today, and it's certainly not going to end today.
So where are we going? So what's the next step? Like, do we have another meeting, or do we bring something back that we're going to review?
The next step is the administration and everything that you see up there. I mean, that right there is evident of the fact that the steps are being taken.
As far as the ordinances or, things that we're adding to the applications, I guess that's what I'm kind of going to see that, or is it just going to happen and we're supposed
Commissioner, yes, the ordinance that you don't have is the ordinance that we've been working on. You already have one in place. Now by the June 25th meeting, you're going to have another piece of your noise ordinance be addressed that hadn't been addressed before.
No, I understand that. I guess I'm asking about not the noise ordinance per se, but the comments that we received today from the public that we can add to these ordinances, like the one young lady stated, adding a check mark to the application. Is that going to be in the ordinance, or is that just going to be on the application? Or are we going to add, other things like mandating that they register their car tags, or like all of the, they have some really good ideas.
Without a doubt,
And so that's
Commissioner.
what I'm asking, like, are those things going to be added to paper, or are we just dialogue?
We just don't dialogue. That's not how we're going to roll here. You know, my team has been taking notes. Several times I stepped down to address some of the things that our residents have said, that you all have said. And right now, as we speak, we're already, our minds are moving in regards to what can we do, making sure that we get the legal side also in place.
So it's going to come back
Yes,
to us?
absolutely.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
I just wanted to mention, this is an evolving process, and we are diligently paying attention to everything that's going on. As a matter of fact, this coming week, there's a code enforcement conference in Orlando. We have an officer attending that, and the officer is actually sitting on a board for a workshop on vacation rentals, and he's going to be bringing a lot of information back on what other jurisdictions within the state are doing and how they're dealing with certain situations and what we do. So we can just compare, every time we get the opportunity to make improvements, we're making improvements. And it's just an ever-shifting process, and we're going to move it.
One more.
State your name and address again, please.
Luis Velo, 2850 Southwest 54th Street, the Estates of Fort Lauderdale. One question that I wanted to ask. Paper trail is extremely important, and I find that the city of Dania at the moment does not have complaints online, which are really recorded, and you have a paper trail, and it's given to the code enforcement officer to follow through. They're doing it by a phone call. That's word of mouth. So when is the website going to go up to date?
Actually, we do have an online complaint link on our website.
Okay, so we're going to do
Which it's been there for years. You can submit a complaint. Either you can leave your contact information to find what the resolution was, or you can make your complaint anonymous, and they're all recorded and tracked.
Okay, do you have a website like they do in other cities where you have, you could attach a picture of the violation? Do you have that? Because I don't think so.
Currently, it's limited on what you can attach. It's basically a form that you can fill out. But as the Assistant City Manager said, we're looking into new technology, and we may be getting involved where we have an app in the future. So,
Commissioner Harris.
No, I agree with Louise that the paper trail is important to have because it becomes part of the public record. So, however, we have to. My only concern is how do you send a complaint via email that doesn't track back to your email if you want to be anonymous?
Yeah, every single complaint that we receive is documented. And that's with a phone call or in person if someone comes in, or if it's via email. If you want to be anonymous and your email address is like mine, my first initial, last name, someone could find out, or you could create a new email address if that's what you want to do, but every single one of the complaints are always documented. That's how we receive them. They become documented, and then they're followed up on.
Because the phone records are part of a log, is that what?
Yeah.
Or are
Absolutely.
they perpetually recorded and saved?
And then the next day, someone fills it out into a log, and that starts a file.
City Manager, do you have something?
Just some of the dialogue that we've been having today, and just one of the things right now that Commissioner James asked also triggered that, we have a public information officer right here. So some of these suggestions, more information, not just online. We have bulletin boards that we've put out. This is something new that we just did recently. We have bulletin boards in all our parks, in the IT community center. I think the more information we put out there, both online and also on a flyer, and the more of this dialogue that we have, the more ideas we get, but we want to be as transparent. And one of the things that Eric discussed, the industry is constantly changing. And I think making sure that our employees are going to these conferences and getting this information, we want to know what are the best practices that other cities are dealing with, be it in Fort Lauderdale or in Miami Beach, and constantly be aware of what we can do better.
Vice Mayor?
Just speaking to the code violation complaint form, it's really, even with my good glasses on tonight, I mean, I can't even find it. I mean, I found it, but it took me 8 minutes, and I'm the vice mayor, so that's probably weird. And then when you go on it, it's really not a great form. There should be something on there that there is things that allow you to upload 3 files, but it could probably be better done and include something that says, so it says type of violation, something about, vacation rental or whatever. So I think we need to take a look at that, and then we need to look at where it is on the page. It's buried, it's the 4th thing on the page. If I'm, again, not wearing the good glasses, you're going to have a hard time finding it. There's nothing that makes it stick out. And honestly, if I'm looking at the code compliance website and I'm just a resident, I'm probably looking because I want to complain about something. So that should probably be at the top, very visible and not
Agreed.
buried. So if someone could make that note and fix it, that'd probably be helpful to some people.
Very good.
Come on up. Please state your name and address.
Alina Capuzzo, 4437 Southwest 27th Terrace. I just wanted some clarification about that the homes that are approved are going to be posted on the website so we can check. I haven't even moved into my home yet, but the homes on both sides of me are going to be vacation rentals, I've already found out. So I'm glad I came tonight because this is a lot of information, but I just want to make sure that I have the right place to find out. Too late, I've already invested way too much in it.
I think you live on my street. I didn't know that either. Okay, anyway, go ahead. All right. Yes, they are going to be online. Go ahead.
So they will be posted?
Yes, they will be posted online. Commissioner Harris, did you have something?
I was just going to say that this is probably the good time to monitor this. As everybody knows, at the end of the year, we're going to have Super Bowl here, and anybody who has some kind of property, there's like 125 different rental sites now. There could be 135 tomorrow, and there could be 200 by the end of the year. So, Commissioner James just said something, and this is part of the problem that our hotel occupancy rates are down, is because people are turning to short-term rentals because they're cheaper, and budget travelers are going to look at that. So it's good that we're getting a handle on this now. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but within the next 2 weeks, we should have some definite changes and some improvements on what we're doing here. So thank you all for coming.
Come on up, Linda. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Linda Wilson. I'm in Roper. I live at 1547 Adams Street in Hollywood. But I want to first of all congratulate you on the ordinance that you did pass, because we've been struggling for 11 years in Hollywood, and because we didn't get in before the state took away, we're suffering that right now. Your ordinance is very well written. I don't know how well it's enforced, but people were asking about what's supposed to happen on your rental agreements. You're supposed to have agreements with the owners. You're supposed to have the names of the people who are there. You're supposed to have the license plates of the cars. You're supposed to have all of this and sufficient waste accommodation and whatever, but is it actually being enforced? I want to bring up a few points on impacts of these BRB and whatever rentals, vacation rentals. Your impact on your legitimate hotels, motels, and tourist accommodations is extremely negative, because for the price of a monthly rental, these vacation rentals are getting this per week or less. So they can have $100,000 fines. They're still getting a month's rent for a week or for 5 days or for a weekend. So they don't care. And if it takes this long to enforce, the law, then you're banging your head against the wall. There has to be a better way of enforcement. Tourism, this is not improving your tourism. It is actually downgrading the level of tourism that you're getting. When you get 10 or 16 or 20 people in a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house, obviously the neighbors are going to be impacted on it. You have the noise, you have the garbage. I'm sure you have resources that are being stretched by your utilities, your water, your sewer, all of that is being impacted. Electricity use. Now, real estate people, they should be very conscious of this. They are selling these homes to investors. Investors who are buying below the market price. You are removing residential properties, affordable residential properties, from people's ability to purchase. These people are investors. They don't care. They don't care. You're losing taxes because many of them still have homestead illegally. In my neighborhood, I think is being a vacation rental. And if it still has a homestead exemption, I call Marty Kier's office and report them. And I don't care if I'm on file or not. It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And it's up to every one of us as residents to be vigilant. If you want to keep your neighborhood as a single family or residential neighborhood, you got to be vigilant. Nobody can do it for you. You know, and now, if you haven't read the weekend's newest vibe on this, now you're going to have rental cars from private owners as vacation rental cars by the hour, by the half day, by the week. How are you going to regulate this? Do you realize the impact that you have on the insurance companies, mortgage lenders, people who are buying houses, even if they buy them as a single-family resident, their mortgage is to that individual. They're not being mortgaged as a commercial. The insurance is also same thing. The impact is wide-ranging, and you've got to find some way to get it under control. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Commissioner James?
Yes, one last thing, only because we have the marina, and I actually, a year ago, went with a friend on an Airbnb boat. Are we looking into anything like this? Does this not affect us at any rate with Airbnb boating? Because we got it for half a day.
I know this is an issue in Fort Lauderdale. I've read about that. In Dania Beach is a much more limited geographic area where this could happen, but our ordinance doesn't regulate vacation rentals on vessels. So that's not something that we would be regulating. There may be people renting their boats out, but we don't have the opportunity to regulate them.
Is it something that we could, because I don't want it to happen to us and then we then look into it, is it something that could affect us or no?
Well, what I said early on in the presentation is that we want to look again at our ordinance to see what we might be able to modify. So this would be one of the things that we'll add to that list.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. City Attorney, just a question. I know one of the problems that we're having has to do with the amount of time it takes to get these offenders or violators to the magistrate. Is there any way that we could speed up the process? I know that there are notice requirements and things like that, but is there anything we can do to speed up the process?
I'm going to meet with the staff to see if there's got some way to meet with Candido's help, that his experience, and Eric's as well, to expedite this. It is a matter of paperwork, but paperwork gets done only by people who take the time to get it done, and they're making the time to get it done. That's our job, to do a better job.
Yeah, we'll work with the attorney.
Okay. Anyone else from the public wish to speak?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, you've already been up twice. I mean, it's, okay.
Mayor Llewellyn.
Name and address, please, again, for the record.
Sean DeRosa, 408 Southeast 5th Street. Mayor Llewellyn, do you live near do you have a short-term rental next door?
Apparently I do.
Okay. I hope you all don't make the assumption that we always feel safe with people just showing up every other day. Because when you said publicly, don't call 911, I felt, and I'm entitled to my feelings, I felt that you were assuming and making the assumption I should always feel safe with whomever shows up next door and whoever I may have an encounter with at any time of the day or night. Unfortunately, I haven't felt safe. Commissioner James adequately brought up, do you want the public now to become the police, the detectives? Now we have a problem. Usually the police like us to stay out of matters, okay? And I have felt unsafe, okay? When you go out to your car at 5:30 in the morning and 5 men come to your car, am I going to get carjacked? Am I going to get robbed? I don't know these people. I've never seen them in my life.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, this isn't
Sean,
like going
if I-
to the Ritz-Carlton on the weekend.
I'm going to address this briefly,
Okay.
but if you have further you want to discuss with me, I'm happy to discuss it with you afterwards. But this is a public forum, so I don't really know this is the appropriate place. But I will say 911 has nothing to do with if there is something going on that there is a safety issue, obviously 911 needs to be called. But if it's not a safety issue and it's a noise violation, that's the difference. The 911 is there for a specific purpose. It is there to help if there is a safety issue, if there is somebody that could potentially be dying or is injured, that's what it's for. It's not for noise ordinances. It's not for noise complaints. And that was the point I was making, because your statement earlier seemed to imply that for anything involving this, including too much traffic or too much noise, that people should be calling 911 if they're not getting a sufficient response. So other than that, we're not going to sit here and go back and forth on this. If you would like to discuss it with me after the meeting, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Well, this is just a clear example of the concern that you're saying our public resources are being pressed. So when you start looking at the fees and budgeting for the fees, I think you do have to look at how can you properly fund BSO officers if you have to add more officers.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Any other commissioner or anybody like to speak? City manager?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who came out, and, this is probably something that we heard about time and time again on all of our emails, so I'm glad we were able to all get together and sort of get on the same page about where we were in terms of preemption, what the city is and is not able to do, what we're going to do moving forward, what you can expect from us. I think that helps us serve you better, and it helps manage what the expectations are. I'm sorry, I realized I jumped the line.
Yeah. Commissioner Harris?
Is it appropriate to have a follow-up to this workshop in 30 or 45 days or less?
I think that's reasonable.
Certainly. We can give you an update on all the things that we've implemented, such as making our website easier to find things. Everything that has been discussed by you and by our citizens has been duly noted.
August 1st, around? Or after we come back from break, maybe?
How about after break, maybe September?
Certainly, we can even incorporate some of this information when we're doing the budget workshop and the public hearings. I think we have like 3 in September.
Because if it's a fact that we need additional personnel, then it would come under the budget hearing for funding.
Yes.
Commissioner James, do you have anything?
I just think that something, if it's just an update, could be brought to us during a commission meeting, during a
Yeah, I
presentation.
agree.
We don't have to have an entire workshop if we're not
Yeah.
going to do this whole dialogue again, so.
Yeah. Okay.
And thank y'all.
And I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out and participating. And keep it up. Keep letting us know. Thanks. With that, we're adjourned.
Alrighty then. Good timing. Look, 5:30, 7:30. We started at 5:30. Boom. Yeah, we have 4 minutes. How are you, ma'am? How are you? Good, Pat. How are you? Well, I know that that's one of the top